On today's video, I'm going to be getting this bass guitar ready for the finish I'll be putting on it next week. I'll be filling the grain on this walnut neck, trying to steam out some dents from this maple body, and doing a ton of sanding. So let's get into it. Alright, so I'm just going to cover the surface of this fretboard with some painter's tape just to protect it while I'm working here. Now what I'm going to do is just take a fresh razor blade and just trim it all out. Okay, so we got the fretboard covered in painter's tape just to protect, the surface of the fretboard, which will not be getting finished. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I got a little bit of glue squeeze out just along the edge of the fretboard and probably around the neck joint too. But I'm just going to go along and clean that up with a chisel. So I just got a regular old chisel here and just going to carefully chip away this glue. Okay, now I'm just gonna work on the rest of the neck joint, so the back side of it. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is sand this entire base with 150 grit, which is gonna get rid of all my 80 grit and 100 grit sanding marks. So I'm just using a regular sanding block for the flat parts. For the rounded parts, we'll see what I do. I might just use my hands. I might use a half round file wrapped in sandpaper. We'll see. We'll see when we get there. One thing I should mention, if you don't know, whenever you're sanding wood, with a sanding block in particular, you want to sand with the direction of the grain. If you sand against the grain, perpendicular to it, you'll end up putting scratches in that are really hard to get rid of. So, good rule of thumb, sand with the direction of the grain. So I remember we did sand the face of the headstock already, so I'm just going to leave that for right now. We'll resand it with a little bit of a finer grit, but now we'll move on to the back of the body. Okay, now I'm going to move on to sanding the back of the neck, and then I'm also going to transition into sanding the sides. Okay, so I sanded about as much as I can at 150 grit with the sanding block and with sandpaper wrapped around my half round file. So the rest of this, like the edges and some of the contours on the neck, I'm honestly just going to go over with some sandpaper in my hand and just get everything smoothed out nicely. And yeah, it's going pretty good so far. I should mention too, for some of these areas that are really tight corners, all I'm going to do is take a putty knife and just wrap some sandpaper around it and kind of just get right into that corner, just real carefully there. And you can do the same thing along the edge of the fretboard here, just being careful not to cause any scratches you don't want. Beautiful. All right, so I got to do some grain filling on my on the walnut on my neck. I got this Gork's Goodfilla water-based wooden grain filler. So this is just like regular wood filler, but to turn it into a grain filler, which is what I need, apparently you have to mix it with just some water. So I'm going to do that. This particular stuff is rosewood color. I need walnut. They make walnut, but it was like twice as much as this stuff for some reason. So I just got this and I'm just going to tint it. And I also got this aniline dye kit. So I'm going to be using this to actually stain my base before I finish it. But I'm going to take, this has got 5 different colors in it. Here, I'll open it up. So this one, we got coal black, royal blue, golden brown, fire engine red, and sunflower yellow. So anyways, we'll be mixing those up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some of the black into this with some water and hopefully make a good grain filler that's nice and dark that'll go good with the walnut. Smells pretty good. It's going to take some of this out of here. So maybe we'll mix it in here. So that's probably more than enough of the filler. So we'll just put that aside. Now let's get it to a good consistency with some of this water. Okay, so I feel like this is probably a good thickness to use for grain filler. It's pretty sloppy. But now I just got to mix some of that aniline dye in here just to get a little bit darker. Maybe we'll add a little bit more water. Maybe add a little bit more of this. Okay, so I got this good filler mixed up with some aniline dye. I think this will be a pretty good shade for walnut. I'm stirring it with a piece of walnut, so it's a little bit darker, but it's just for filling the grain, so should be good. Okay, so maybe we'll start with the headstock here. All right, well, that's the front side of that. Let's get to the back side of the neck. Actually, you know what? I've got a little knot here in the maple that I'm actually going to try filling with this. I'm going to put some tape around it just in case the aniline dye wants to stain the wood. Okay, hopefully that works. You know what? I should probably tape this whole joint just in case. All right, I guess we'll start up here. Okay, so there we go. I got the grain filler basically smeared on this entire surface of the walnut. And yeah, I'm just going to let this dry probably for a couple hours. I don't know how long it takes, but after that, I'm going to have to come back and sand it. So yeah. Okay, so I let this grain filler dry overnight. So it's definitely dry now. Now what I'm going to do is sand everything with 220 grit. So I got some 220 grit sandpaper here. And we're just going to rip it into some pieces. So this is what it looks like close up when the filler is dry. Looks kind of gross, but I'm going to start sanding this headstock and just see what it looks like. Well, I guess it worked. I don't know. If you compare it to the spot in the truss rod channel there, you can see what the grain used to look like, and now it definitely looks a lot more filled, so right on. I'm just going to sand the rest of this thing at 220, and yeah, I'll take it from there. All right, so I just finished sanding this whole thing down with 220 grit sandpaper. Honestly, it's starting to get real smooth. There's a couple things I need to do before I move on to my next and final grit of sandpaper before I start finishing, which is 320. I've got a couple of dings in this base, in particular on the maple part of it, the body. But right there, you can see a ding. There's one right there too. I want to see if I can steam these out. The other thing I got to do is on this neck where I was filling it with a grain filler, the grain filler filled in the end of the fret slots that was basically a void. But on the part of the fretboard that's over the body, they didn't get filled in. So I'm just going to fill those fret ends over the body in. I also am going to touch up this knot a bit with a bit more grain filler. Okay, so I'm getting ready to attempt to steam out the dents in this body. Okay, so I've got a clothes iron, I got a piece of shop towel, and I got some just regular water. So I just soaked this towel down with water. It's not dripping wet, but it is saturated, and I'm just going to put it over top of the dent, and then take the iron and just attempt to steam the dent out. So that didn't quite do it. So it's gotten it a little bit better. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to work on this one. That's okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem like that one's going to come out of there. Let's try this one over here. That one's coming out a bit better. So this dent clearly did not come out, so we're gonna have to worry about that in the clear coat. The line that was over here, it appears that I was able to get that out. So that's good. Now I just got one more on the front that I want to take a look at. So this one on the front is right there. I have a feeling that's a gouge and not a dent, but let's try to get rid of it anyway. That did not work, so that's clearly a gouge there. That's okay. We got one out of the three. I guess that's not very good, really, but at the end of the day, the fact that there's only 3 blemishes on the body of this thing is actually really good for me. So I'm going to take that as a win. And yeah, so away she goes, I guess. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, I just got a few more things I just want to touch up with the grain filler. So I'm going to do that, let it dry, and then I'll come back and do a bit more sanding on this. Okay, so that's it for that. I'm just going to leave this wood filler to dry. Okay, so the filler has had a chance to dry now. I'm just going to give this a quick sand in the areas I was working on with a 220, and then I'm going to jump down to 320 and give the whole thing a sand with that. So now we're up to 320. Just get started with that. So that's it for this video. Obviously, I've sped up the sanding footage, but in reality, I have close to 5 hours of sanding in this video. In the next video, I'll be staining and lacquering this bad boy. After that, I'll be buffing and polishing the finish, installing the electronics, installing all the other parts, setting it up, and then showing it off. So if you found that interesting and want to see how this base turns out, make sure to subscribe. And if you're still watching, do me a favor, leave a like or comment. It really helps out the channel, and I appreciate it. Until next week, talk to you later.